when we get to it.
Because I know the mayor and Katie's in St. George.
Oh.
I'd like to report, I have my training completed.
Oh, good.
I forgot I signed up for those land use things and forgot all about them, so
Lou's gonna report on some
I'm still.
training.
Yeah, see, Lou and I signed up for that same class and I forgot all about it. I just got sidetracked this past week and,
Well, he was really intrigued by it.
yeah. Well, I listened to that 1 hour one that they had here locally.
Yeah, there were
Do you have to what?
there's 3 of them.
Do you have to have like 3 hours or something? 4 hours, yeah.
Or
I don't
we
even,
get an hour for going to them.
well,
Oh, come sit.
even if it's from my kitchen table,
Yeah, anywhere you want.
even, if-
Most of them choose farthest away from me. That's okay.
but it's an hour if you go. I just watched it online. I don't think you don't count an hour for sitting in
Yeah,
your
you do.
kitchen.
Yeah.
For your
What do you
kitchen, what I'm saying is you get an hour for going.
Oh, no, you get an hour for coming to the meetings. You get 1 hour for attending, oh gosh,
The
attending
meetings
the
here.
meetings here.
Oh, these meetings?
Yeah,
Oh, for the year?
yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah. I honestly don't even count the hours. I just want to learn this stuff.
yeah.
So I
I'm
don't
sure
even.
you're
Well,
fine
you have
with
to
it.
have it to keep the city in compliance.
Well, I understand that and I report that, but I did, well, you were on that one for, they one.
I know your sweet wife.
Yes, you mentioned that. Yeah. She's like, is there any possibility that's her? I'm like,
Yeah,
"No."
Like Friday morning.
Yeah.
Well, I signed up for the ones this past week, the April 5th and
She's like,
6th.
yeah.
But I
She's
completely
like,
forgot.
oh, my
about it.
husband's Greg. I'm like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
What a small world. And then she's like, that's so funny, I'll have to tell him, because
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, see, that's the one I signed up for is the
Months
Thursday
ago,
and Friday.
I had sent her like the whole roster because I have celiac too.
And I signed
And
up
she's
for it. I
like,
didn't-
oh my gosh, it's such a small world. I'm like, I know. Which is so cool.
Yeah, see, that day they had one in St. George and then they had another one on Friday.
Yeah.
And I forgot all about those.
That's the day I came in to measure the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that was on Friday, yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I forgot about those classes up there, but Lou said they were really hard because instead of having a PowerPoints that you can see online, they had a video camera and trying to show it from a video, not linked in so
not
you
to a
could,
computer.
not like the one that they showed on Wednesday.
Right,
So.
yeah. So
Anyway.
I attended the first 2 classes
Mhm.
of the, League of Cities and Towns.
That thing's working.
What thing? Oh yeah, got new batteries.
Is that all it took? Oh,
Yeah, I think it was dead for a while. Or
Well, that-
it was silenced for a while.
that pendulum hasn't been running at all.
He's the one that started.
Yeah, those other ones were,
Yeah,
I just had too much going on.
no, I understand,
And so,
believe me.
well, the land use intrigues me because,
What's nice about it is it's, they recorded it.
yeah, and I can go online and see it, but
Right.
the thing that frustrates me, what I saw on Wednesday was the fact that
Do you need the Wi-Fi password probably?
I hotspot to my phone too. If that's whatever. If there is one.
Can we make that 2 of us on the Wi-Fi?
oh, it's in the last computer, right there, on the, screen, I think. No, over there, one more up.
Up there, it's.
Oh, yeah, it's right there.
Tucked right there where I usually sit.
The thing that intrigued me or that kind of got me on the training on Wednesday was the fact that they're not allowing the planning commission members or the city council to review the final plans. You can only have 4 shots at
Right.
reviewing.
And most of it's gonna be engineering.
Yeah, and they're not.
It's
I
a
don't
joint,
know.
right?
No.
It's not.
No.
Oh, but I'm on the,
Oh, yeah, you're supposed to be here.
no, I'm out.
Oh, okay, like,
I was
you
like,
usually
wait a
come.
second. Right.
Just
No.
go up the gutter and fall down like the rest of us.
I was like, why isn't there any other city council
special.
here?
Oh yeah, sorry, you can't go through there.
And then I forgot I'm the liaison.
Yeah, you're supposed to be here.
Isn't that in early May, the
That's
first?
fine.
Second week in May.
Yes, let's
Oh,
see.
yeah, 'cause I won't- the first
Let's
week, I
give
think.
Lou one more minute, but I'll just proceed with my items and Yeah, May 4th.
It was May 4th.
That is the joint work session
Also-
with the city
Also,
council.
we're doing it on the Thursday of city council instead of.
Mhm.
meeting.
Instead of a planning meeting, yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
So you'll want to add to your calendar. So we requested a joint work session with the city council on May 4th at 6. So it'll be an odd Thursday. I don't know where Lou is, so maybe we'll just move on, but he's kind of like a big deal on
Well,
this.
He's the
all.
closest. He lives closer than the rest of us.
And he usually lets me know when he's not
There's a
going to be
soccer
here.
game going between him and the.
We can play dodgeball as he's going through, is that what you're saying?
Um,
I don't know, he's pretty spry. He may be out there kicking the ball around.
yeah, seriously. He's gonna come in and say a cow got out or something.
Fourth of
Uh-huh.
May, okay, I'll have to throw on the calendar.
And I
I
won't
would-
be to that one. I'm sorry. I'll be out of town.
Okay.
That is the joint one.
Right.
That's okay. That is the one where the city
My
gets.
calendar, right?
Mhm.
So like I'll have all the info.
Right, exactly. And I need to retype it up and send it out. I just haven't gotten through it yet. So yeah, everyone will have it. And then, so last two work sessions, well, first, welcome to Jason and Greg. They're our new alternate members for, we haven't seen you. Were you here last time?
No,
Okay, I'm like, we haven't seen you since
for about a month.
their interviees and stuff like that.
But I know both of them.
Brandon was on the interview committee with me and Lyle.
So much fun.
So, I gave them all lowdown via email,
Show up.
but we've been working on a 55 and older patio
Last
home
month.
ordinance. So, and I'll send you the latest notes that we put together. So we kind of get to the point where now we have to meet with the city council and make sure we're on the right track and we haven't forgot things, and then we can kind of dial it in. So that's what's May 4th at 6.
Should we go around and introduce ourselves to them so they know who we
Where
are?
you start, Lyle?
Oh,
You go for it.
I'm Lyle Earl. I was on the interview. I'm vice chair. And just live about 3 minutes away, but it actually takes me 20 minutes now to go around the block. You know how that is.
I'm Janelle Latham, city council, but I'm the liaison for the planning commission. So I'm to most of your meetings too. And yeah, I've seen you both before.
Great.
I'm Greg Baptist. I live on the other side of the Chug Farm.
Okay.
So.
Darren Roy Lance, and I live 5 minutes from each of you. 5-minute walk, 5-minute walk.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm Jason Anderson, new here, obviously, but yeah, I've been in Far West about 2 years. My family and I have been here about 2.5 years now.
Brandon Whitesides, I was a former alternate member, so.
and I live over in this-
Congratulations.
Yeah. Moving on up.
And you'll notice he always wears some sort of Far West shirt.
Great. Now I have to stay with the pattern. So luckily I have like 4 shirts. So I'm
Yeah,
like,
you have to do
I'll just
laundry.
rotate. I know.
You have to get with it. I've got like 20 Far West shirts, so.
Oh, no.
It's growing. I have 4 right now. So I live in the Smiths family park area.
Okay.
That's what I was.
Awesome. So,
City council, I got one every year, so.
so I'm Greg Pierce. I live 5 minutes away from Darren. We've been here, we're coming up on 8 years at the end of May. So,
And I'm Geneva, and I'm the planning chair, and I live over in the old Walkwest, Golden Eagle. So. Okay, we'll skip Lou's. I don't know, I threw on the discussion of the 55 and older, but there really isn't much discussion left until we meet with the city council. But if I mean, based on, I know I didn't send it to you too, so I apologize, but based on what I sent out last time, is there anything that anyone had comments on that I can revise in the meantime? Otherwise, we'll go right to the landscape.
I was just saying, if we turn and go home.
Did we incorporate anything that, the concerns I had about driveway length and
Yep.
all that?
And we did, and we talked more about, like where the setbacks will come from and driveways. I think we pretty much, and I'll have to revise and send it out. We pretty much called all the setbacks, which were perfect. And there was, what was your other one too?
Low income housing for first time home
Yeah,
buyers.
First time home buyer, another community
Oh,
Some patio home
like
community.
incentive or something, or what?
Because they're gonna be smaller and lower priced,
Yeah.
might be an incentive for.
Just another
Yeah.
idea, something we can plan
Or rather
for.
than a 55 and older community, have a
Starter.
starter home community.
One of the
That
problems.
would differ from this ordinance.
That would.
Oh, okay,
definitely.
okay. So
But
maybe-
that was just a suggestion for a future discussion.
No, I think it's a great idea, but the concern then becomes is with the price of land.
Mhm.
Okay, the builders have to build certain size homes in order to make that money back. Are they gonna be willing to build smaller homes? Cause I have the same argument. Why do you need a 3,000 square foot starter home? What's wrong with a 1,100 to 1,500 square foot?
Well, and
starter
most
home?
of, you go to Green Farm or you go to, what's the one Nielsen Homes has, or I mean Ivory. Those are just small footprints. They're like 2,100 square feet. They're like 900 square feet on the main level.
Right.
So they are, and those are at an affordable number.
So expensive.
Yeah, but that is your starter home.
They're more affordable.
Yeah.
More like
It's more
300, right?
affordable than the 3,000 square
3 or
foot.
Sure,
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
that's what you're looking at. I mean, anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 is a starter home.
Right, yeah, that's big. Okay, I'll send that back out and really we're good on that one until we meet with the city. Lou, did a cow get out or what? What happened? Where have you been?
I would have been here sooner if this road closure that
Clearly.
got closed for a month.
Yeah, I was trying to think, I'm like, maybe you forgot about the road closure. Yeah.
That's gotta be it.
It's like, how long does it take to run a pipe across a road?
I don't know. That's, yeah, I know.
Well, if you live in Kaysville, you have to do it twice.
Yeah. Sure.
We're gonna get, so we kind of skipped over to the
Let's dig 'em up.
455 and older, but now I'm gonna give it back to you.
Good, I'm glad you did.
And since you missed the introduction, Jason and Greg are our new alternate members. Oh, you were at city council though last week.
Yeah,
Okay,
yes.
okay. So we'll give it back to you, or do you need a second?
No,
Get
let
your
me,
papers organized.
yeah, there's three different things. I don't know. Brandon, you attended that training on March the 29th. Okay, so when I start, they mentioned some about this deed transfer rights thing. You listened in on that one? Okay. Anyway, I may babble a little bit when I get to that because it's kind of complex. But the first one I'd like to report a little bit on, and these are just some high points. It was the moderate income housing training that took place on the 29th of March. Was you part of that?
Yes,
I know you attended it, so correct me if
March 29th. Was it was online?
yeah, it was
Yeah,
online.
it was like in the
Yeah.
middle of the day.
And,
Yeah.
City leagues and towns.
yeah.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, and it
yes,
was
yes.
well presented. The one done by the Land Institute, it was something else, but anyway, let me just touch on some of the high points that they had. And that's basically what they were doing is reviewing, the update of what's taken place. One of the first things I noticed is they made a comment about who submits the annual reports. And they said it was not going to be the planning commission anymore. That's going to be submitted administratively.
Yeah.
So whether the city council's involved or it's just the office in there, I'm not sure about that. You might know more about that.
I don't know either. I did notice that the initial year's legislative, but anything after that subsequently is
So
administrative,
our
unless you're making
role-
changes to ordinances.
Unless we're asked to, when we start reconsidering lists or new
Right.
priorities, then we'll probably be brought into the loop again. But in terms of the year-to-year routine reporting, it's not under the purview of the planning commission. And they post they posted on May 1 and it's due August 1 each year, okay? And they have up to 12 months to report based on when you submitted your first report. Okay, so I think they've done this so they could stagger it, so they're not getting all the reports just stacked up at the, January 1 anyway. So that's something to do. They indicated on the reporting elements that are to go into the report. I'll just mention these, although once again, it's not a responsibility. They want to know about any actions that have been taken. They want to know about any land use regulations and decisions that have been made. They want those to be documented and reported. They want also to report any barriers that the city may have encountered to try to implement what we've got on our list. They talked about reporting any action we've had on auxiliary dwelling units. And this will be a problem for Far West because we've got to somehow figure out what's out there. We've not to date had any reporting system. I think there's going to be some reluctance on some people to disclose the information for fear that they're going to get in trouble later on. So anyway, but that will be handled administratively. We have to, in that report, there'll be some indication of the market response to what we've proposed, which would be any subdivisions that may have been put in place or building permits, any kind of documentation we can present to them to show action on our part.
Or even, from what I understand, it was like, if developers haven't even come and presented any
But at
plans.
least made an inquiry,
Right.
right? The point is,
You
they
can
don't
say
want
you
us to
have
do
that.
the smoke and mirrors routine and say, we're doing fine. They want to say, okay, you prove it to us. We want to see it. So, and then the last part of that reporting element is just any recommendations that we might want to mention, you know. They wanted, as far as actions taken, they said that demonstrate that action is relevant to making meaningful progress on implementation. So they don't want vague sort of dance around the issues. They want to show that when you report action taken, it actually demonstrates that something's been done. And more importantly, it's relevant to what we said we were going to do in those 5 items. Okay. There's that. Yeah, you're right. In other words, there's nothing unusual about that. If we submit a report and it's rejected, we have 10 days to appeal, and only 10 days. If you go beyond that, your window's shut. They made that very clear, at least that, you know, then given whatever happens, you have a 90-day window to resubmit after that. And what will happen is they will get the report and they'll either say it's incomplete or not adequate, or they just flat out reject it. If there's just things that need to be fixed in it, we've got that 90-day window to resubmit.
I have a note here, and tell me if you understood it better. I have a note, if you choose to appeal though, you can't go back and do your 90-day, like, it's one or the other.
That's right. They show a chart that was just all dichotomies. It's this or this,
Right.
this or this. You can't, okay, this didn't work, I'm gonna try something else. No, that.
If you choose to appeal, that's the way you go.
That's-
And if
and-
you lose the appeal, you lose funding.
Right.
Yeah, and that's it. If you lose the appeal, you're gone. If you win the appeal, then you move forward, okay? So you've counteracted what they found fault, lacking in the
Funding
thing.
for a year.
In other words, pick your battles before you
Yeah.
make a decision.
Well, it's very obvious to me they're serious about this.
Right.
And they're putting enough rules in place to make sure that the cities understand when you submit a report, it better be substantive, it better be relevant, and it better be on target for what you said you're gonna do.
Didn't they say they're putting together some new forms too?
Yes, yeah, in fact, the
Modifying some
reporting
things.
process, well, there's enough elements changed. Yes, they did mention that. Okay, so that's you understand the 10 days to appeal, 90 days to resubmit. Now, the restrictions were interesting. They were 3 restrictions previous. In 2024, they've added a couple more, and they have bite. One of them is a daily fee charged. And the second one, which is even worse, is no funding from the state tax commission. So they're serious about this. Let's see. As far as the 5 strategies, you must show progress on the 3 strategies. If you remember there was 3 required, and we put 2 in there because there's some extra perks. Well, the way the perks work is you can't just put the extra 2, 4 and 5 in there and not do anything about them. You've got to show some accomplishment in 4 and 5 to qualify for the perks. But there's no penalty.
Right.
If you
only
don't-
have to be in compliance
So
with 3.
first 3 are the ones we have to absolutely show some action on. Any questions on that? You want to add anything more that I might have missed?
So did we prioritize our 5, 1, 2, 3, 4,
Well, now that's a
5.
question. That wasn't a priority
You
order.
just have to do 3 of the 5.
You just have to
You
do
just have to
3
have
of the
a
5, and so
shared
if 2 of them drop out, then
Yeah.
no
Which
big
is,
deal.
that's very good, you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
We
But
don't
if we
have to
show
say.
action on all 5, then we
Then
get
we're
the-
in great
the
shape.
return.
If we show action on 3, we're still in good shape. We just won't
Lions.
have as many perks. Okay?
One thing I thought was interesting is that like, you know, that we're supposed to report on barriers, but they gave an example, say like, we wanted to rezone and the council voted no. Well, they said that's not gonna really be, that's not gonna go well. They said it'll get reported to the state that the city councils aren't cooperating or whatever, and they'll enforce it harder, I guess.
Which is obvious. If you aren't trying to support the very things you say you're gonna do, you shot
Then you're
yourself in
not,
the
you're just
foot, you
writing the
know?
paper, yeah.
But I don't
Yeah,
know, in some cases, like, city council should have all approved these, but if the planning commissions kind of took the lead on this and then, you know, submitted them, and I don't know if there's some clashing, but we just have to be on the same page, obviously, because,
And that's where, that was the example, I think, that the planning commission did one thing and it was
Right.
rejected by the city council. And then they used that as their reason why they couldn't implement.
yeah, it wasn't gonna
And it
go.
was sort of like, well, we couldn't do it, but it was our own fault because we rejected the proposal submitted by the planning commission.
Yeah.
In the future, that won't be a problem, and it wasn't this case anyway. We just made a recommendation to the city council, so it came from the city council in the first place, so.
I just thought it was interesting, because the city council needs to be aware, like, if it meets our strategies, like, and it's with our ordinances, you don't have a lot of choice, like, you know what I mean, like,
Well, we committed to do something.
Yep.
Just take it serious. We've
To
committed.
accommodate it,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, it's, the things that we've submitted that we are going to try to do are reasonable. And we would have to reverse our philosophy and where we think we're headed to not move forward on it. It's not like we put things out there we were choking on when we submitted them. At least I didn't. In fact,
And we had talked about our goals on them when we first chose them, you know,
Right.
what we could obtain in
well, and we
them.
could have stopped with 3, but we felt pretty comfortable with 4 and
Right.
5, so that should say something.
it wasn't clear to me. They talked about the 5-year strategy. It wasn't clear to me. Some of them were like, well, what if we finish one? Do we get a new one? They were like,
Let me think.
we're not sure.
They danced around that one. I didn't put anything in my notes. 'cause-
We're like, what do we do for years 2 to 5 if you complete a
Is
strategy?
this the question and
once we
answer one?
complete all 5 of them within a reasonable amount of
Right,
time.
then
Well,
what? Are
they
you
haven't-
compliant, or do you have to have 5 always?
They haven't gone that far.
I don't think they've thought that far out.
They're worried about the report requirements in the next 12 months, I think is what they're.
I listened to some of it. Did they ask the question, if you already have it in your city, does that count going forward? Or was that something we talked about?
No, they asked that. Someone asked like if it's already been done. I
already
said
have.
no. Like.
So it doesn't count if it's already.
Like if one of our and we did,
Well,
we had.
this is on a timeline, you know? So we submitted what we are going to do, future tense.
Right.
If we did it 2 years ago, that doesn't,
Right,
But
we
like the
can't say our.
accessory dwelling we already had, but we added the
reporting.
detached portion
Exactly,
and
and
the
that was-
reporting.
right.
That updates it. Okay.
Well, it gives you a way to have measurable progress on it, I guess.
So it will be interesting to see. It will be up to the city council and the office people to figure out how we're going to document things. I think that's our biggest challenge now, is documenting things. We have a lot of evidence for it, but they're gonna have to dig into files and watch reports and start counting numbers. And with the accessory dwelling units, we're just gonna have to uncover what's out there.
Yeah, and
So,
almost have an incentive for
You
them to come
know,
in.
where everything's recorded and they have minutes, they can go back and they can put together
it's just gonna have
everything.
to, they're gonna have to do some homework,
Yeah.
or office work. This is homework.
Which makes the
This
most
is what we're
sense
paying
because
for,
they
so-
face them more than we would ever. I mean, we wouldn't have access to that kind of stuff.
Well, and they see the day-to-day things. They see all the applications and
Yep.
we're sort of,
Right.
we're out of the
We're out
loop
of
on a
that.
lot of that stuff, so.
Yep.
Okay, the Land Institute had several days of training. They had one called Preserving Open Space and Community Character, which I listened to, and a second one called Land Use Basics. Now, let me say up front that unlike the League of Cities and Towns, which have their act together they didn't have the audio working. When the audio worked, the video turned off. And when the video worked, the audio didn't work. And even when the audio was on, you couldn't understand it. It sounded like he was talking through a gunny sack or something. It was really bad. And finally, at the very end of that day, the day I listened to, they had somebody with a camera in the back of the audience
Just hand.
you're trying to see the visuals from that distance.
Oh.
I never really could see the visuals clearly because they're taking a camera and looking at a screen. You know how well that works.
Mhm.
Okay. So understand that this is going to be a little spotty. The first one, I was intrigued by it because it said preserving open space and community character. And I thought, well, that's something we're quite interested in. It turns out the whole presentation was about TDRs. You probably know quite a bit about those or
What does
nothing.
TDR
Okay.
stand for? TDR.
It's transfer development rights. Okay. Now, let me just create a scenario where I don't think we need to worry too much about this. If a city within the bounds of the city, there is some open space that's privately owned that you would want to preserve. And this could be the last farm and you somehow wanted it to stay in farming, or there might be a woodland or anything that has kind of a unique character as open space. We're not talking about a city park here,
Right,
okay?
right.
If that was under private ownership and the city was interested in it, this is the mechanism that you would use. It involves a private transaction between the developer in the city and the landowner. And here's the way it works. So the landowner's got a property. This transfer development rights, basically what the landowner gives up is the right to change the way the land is managed. So if it's a woodland, he can't sell the woodland and develop it. You know, if it's a pond or whatever, because that's what the city's trying to preserve, okay? So that's what the city's getting out of it. Now you might say, why would any landowner want to transfer some of their
Transferring it
rights
to
of
a
what they
different
can do with their
property.
property? The reason why they would do that is they're gonna get paid for it. Okay, the question is, where does the money come from? And this
And
where
at what rate?
and this is where it gets really messy. What they basically do in a lot of cases is they will have a city ordinance which will allow a certain density of housing. And so the city will tell the developer, if you pay us so much that we will then give to that landowner to transfer the development rights, we will allow you to increase the density
Of another piece.
of the property there are. So a developer's coming in
So
and he
there's
can.
3 parties? There's
No,
the
there's
city
just
and
two.
two?
The
Okay.
city is kind of in the middle of this, okay? And where the city plays a role in this is we actually allow an allowance or on one of our zone requirements, usually for density. So the developer comes in and says, what he's doing is he's buying extra rooftops
Mhm.
for the same unit area, okay?
Can I paraphrase this a little bit?
Please do.
Okay, so if this gentleman over here that you want the wooded area for has 3 acres, and this developer's developing 10 acres, you can take that 10 acres, and you know what the zone is and your density is already, your rooftops for that R115,
Right.
okay? You can now add that 3 acres of wooded area to the
As
10
if
acres.
That was there. and
Oh.
you
As if
said-
it were there.
Right.
So.
But how does it relate? So the wooded area guy might be a different property owner than the 10-acre developer.
Right.
So does
No,
the
they are
10-acre?
different.
They are different.
They are
So
definitely
there's
different.
3 parties, so.
No, there's
No.
two. One's called the receiving area and the spending area.
But
okay.
there's potentially 2 owners, is
There-
what I'm saying.
There are 2 owners
So the
involved.
developer
So
of the 10
developer of the
acres is
and the
going
private
to,
property,
is going to entice the private property owner.
the city's gonna.
No, the city's the broker.
They want the
Okay.
city
The city
to
brokers
entice,
this.
okay? So, for example, if
But
you
what's-
had,
What's it, okay.
if you had a lake or a pond, a fishing pond where all the kids and everybody in the neighborhood come,
Yeah.
or you have a wooded area that you wanna preserve because it's a wildlife area.
Right.
Similar to, say, if you had an area like the wildlife farm on 12th.
I get that part of it. I'm trying to figure out the transaction to
Okay,
how,
but what he
because the
says is.
developer has nothing to do with the
Oh,
wooded
no,
area
but-
landowner. Why
He's
is
giving the city money to
to
buy that
pay?
in order to get the
Oh.
additional density.
So, and he's giving the
So-
city money because we're allowing to put higher density on his,
So it's like a
his
trickle
property.
down. So he's paying so that they can purchase the wooded area,
Right.
which would allow him to have
So
more rooftops. I
basically, they're
gotcha.
getting an additional 3 acres virtually
Correct.
and using that density to.
Well, we're
Yeah.
allowing
No,
a
it
higher
makes sense.
density.
Right.
And
As-
the 3
as-
acres don't exist.
In other words, you're gonna cram it all into.
Exactly.
Right.
That's as if it was an extra additional
Right.
30.
So whatever zone it is, it's no longer just 10 acres.
Yeah.
Just
You
allows you
now
higher
have to
density.
calculate
Yeah, that
the
makes
additional
sense.
3 acres. So it's 13 acres that you're calculating your rooftops for.
That does sound.
How long does that last?
People will do that.
Oh, it depends. If
he
they
sells
get
his
in a
house,
conservation easement, this is
Yeah.
forever.
I'm just saying, if he sells his house, could the next person come and divide
Yes, he
that property
can.
and sell it?
Because it's
No,
be owned by the city.
Yeah, the deed to go to the city.
So it's only a one-time thing.
Right.
It's an open space conservation easement that'll never go away.
Okay.
That property once purchased can never go away because it's owned by the city, or maintained by the city. So.
The
Now,
one, yeah.
now, first of all, does Far West have any open space that we would want to preserve?
I don't think
And
so.
I'm not aware, and they even talked about some communities wanting to preserve a farm.
I can think of a farm I'd like to preserve.
No, but, yeah, but you understand, they even do that. Well, because we
Sure.
want a rural environment, we want to make sure that farm owner he doesn't die and his kids sell it off for development.
Right.
So number one is there any, if the answer to that question is no, then this isn't even relevant to Far West. The
Sure.
second thing, which gets really sticky though, is we have tightened up our housing density about as tight as we want it. You know what this would mean? It would mean they could cram more in that development
Right.
than our ordinance allows.
Right, but it'd be similar to, well, I mean, not to ordinance wise, but it'd be similar to the higher density for the more open space percentage, like we kind of have written.
Except that the scale is kind of,
Right.
you know, you don't preserve 1 acre natural areas. You're talking 5, 10, 15, 20, I mean, you're talking a chunk of
Huge
ground,
amount,
you know?
yeah.
You start dumping that in a development that's not enormous size,
Sure.
and you start packing the houses in there pretty tight.
So if you were to say, take the property behind Peterson's, okay, behind the fire station in Peterson's,
Yeah.
that large property, okay?
Yeah.
And you were to say, take the Papa George Farm,
No.
okay, or the Papa George Dairy and say, we want to preserve the Papa George Dairy. Okay, so now all that property, whatever, what is it, 15 acres, 20
I'm
acres?
not sure what it
I don't
is
know,
now.
it's, yeah,
Changed
it's
after that.
changed up, yeah. But anyway, you take that density and add it to that property behind.
Right. But you don't have to take all of it. You could
You do
take,
have to take all of it, because
Well,
you're buying it all of it.
but you
whatever
don't
you
have
buy.
to. Yeah, whatever you
Well-
buy. You could, like the church property, you could say, well, we want a 5 acre park
No,
here.
you don't
That's
have to
it.
buy all the
Right.
parcel that the
Right.
individual owns.
Right.
All you're doing is saying, this piece, we want to restrict development on it and preserve it
As open space.
as open space. We want to preserve it basically for what it actually is right now.
Sure.
You know,
So
we're
if
not
you
going to
wanna use
develop
it
the
as-
open space.
Right.
We like the open
It doesn't
space
have to be
preserved.
the, yeah, it doesn't have to be the whole parcel.
No.
No, oh, no.
But if you were doing it for, like you're saying, if you wanted to preserve the dairy, then yeah, you probably have to take the whole thing.
Well, you have to because it's got to function. You're getting,
Right, yeah, I don't know why.
I just use
you're
that as-
buying the
I
farm,
just
not
use that
just
as
3
an
cows.
elaborate-
Right,
It's an elaborate
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
because
all
you're
I-
right, then that would be probably pretty impactful if you had 15 acres and all of a sudden you have, I mean, that could double someone's density.
Yeah,
When you start looking at it's messy.
sure.
And they made it very clear, there's a lot of times where this doesn't work. It sometimes works beautifully, and they gave some wonderful examples, but they said, you gotta be very careful how this thing is structured and laid out and think it through very carefully. And if in our case, how it complicates our housing density versus what is out there in Far West that we so desperately wanna preserve.
I think that's the main thing. I don't.
Which
think
is,
there's
and that's why,
nothing-
when I got
don't
done
think
with
there's
this, I
anything
thought, well,
here that we
where are we going with this?
desperately need to preserve.
No, I don't. There's not anything unique enough.
And we still have enough pull on the bigger parcels that are left to develop that our open space would be incorporated in anything we wanted to keep
Sure.
there.
But you still have to include, you'd probably end up losing some density or open space, because of you'd have to give up something for the additional rooftops.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That could be a lower density, instead of an R115, you go to an R110. Okay.
I'm
An
saying
R180.
on those bigger parcels, we have enough, I mean, with their 10% or 20% open space, we have enough to preserve the parks that are in our plans.
No, but
Oh, yeah.
So that piece, like we would never, or the open space that's in our plans like that, we don't have a need to go beyond what we already have planned.
Right.
For benefit, then you may have to go with a different density.
yeah, whatever, it's built into the general plan anyway with that open space.
Yeah,
so
it's our
it's easier
concept
just
of
to leave
open
well enough
space has
alone.
been parks and recreation open space. We have never talked about open space to preserve something in its pristine current condition.
Right.
So unless somebody here can see in their crystal ball something that I've missed, to me, it's useful to know about it. And, but it would be very messy, and boy, you'd have to think it through very carefully, and in my view, you gotta want that to preserve that open
Mhm.
space really badly to get into this messy other side.
And-
I would agree with 100%. I don't think it's something we want to go to, but it's something we need to be aware of, because if a developer comes in and proposes that, we should be aware of what the rule is.
Okay, let's see, there was a couple of, oh, yes, there's a couple of other things that, oh no, I'm getting the land use basics now. Okay, they were all over the board, and basically it was, somebody asked a question, we'll answer it. And they deferred to lots of legal cases for some of these things, some of which were kind of interesting, many of which I didn't understand what they were saying. They talked about the land use authority. That's the body that makes the decisions. Everybody knows who the land use authority is in Far West. It isn't the planning commission. We are a recommendation body, and they usually listen to what we have to say because we invest some serious time thinking about it. But, here's one I found interesting. We have more than once had a situation where we saw a problem, we set in motion changing the ordinance, but there's no way we could get the ordinance changed before somebody could sneak in and do what we're trying to prevent in the ordinance, okay?
Like the
Because the
grandfathered
ordinance had
method.
not been formalized.
Pending ordinance.
Now, what they've talked about is you can impose an initiated ordinance. They called it an initiated ordinance, pending, same thing, we're getting to the same thing. Initiated ordinance, you've got a 6-month window. So if we start dialogue on an ordinance, that's initiating it. We have a 6-month period where whatever we're putting in that ordinance is in effect.
So it's kind of like the same as a moratorium almost.
Yeah, well, but usually we've always waited till we make sure we had everything signed and approved.
Well, and usually, yeah, if you had your application in prior to it being approved, you were grandfathered into the
Right.
previous.
So, but if we can see something coming and we start taking action, but we can't formalize the ordinance in time, as long as we're within that 6-month period, we can do it, okay?
That's
like
actually
that.
pretty good.
Oh, well, I think it's great. Second thing they were talking about conditional uses and situations where people have, and we've not had this, where somebody's challenged our conditional uses, where we've listened.
Challenged.
In other words, somebody comes in, the planning commission, and we set conditions on it, conditional uses. We've done this often, and I don't remember any case where somebody's challenged it legally and said, okay,
Challenge the conditions we put on
condition,
them?
condition, okay?
Well, because usually they have to accept them when we're out in front, like, hey, is
Well,
that
but they
okay?
they have the legal right to challenge a condition.
I think the biggest thing here, Lou, and again, it's fantastic that you're bringing this stuff up. The condition would be, you have to have a certain architectural type. Okay, that's gonna hamper the developer. That's where the challenges I think are coming from. The conditions that we've put on stuff that I've seen since I've been a
Or
member.
cosmetic.
Same as what they've
Are
removed.
minor.
from
Oh, they're
residential.
trivial.
Yeah, I mean, they're not You know, you're not having to change the
You're
architecture
telling
of
a
your
guy,
house.
you can't build it the way you want, you gotta do it, you gotta
Right.
re-go
But
back.
that's
go back.
stemming from the residential area where they've removed all requirements on CCNRs
Agreed.
and architectural features. So that's stemming from there. And they're saying, why do I have to be held responsible
Right.
for that? So I could see that.
Well, we can still do that. It's at the discretion of the administration. But the criteria that they listed that you better have in place are, it's gotta be done independently. So if you come up with some reason why they can't do what they wanna do, you're imposing a condition.
Mhm.
You've gotta have some independent source that validates why that's reasonable.
Right.
It's gotta be credible. And it's gotta be relevant. It can't be some case history that doesn't even have a bearing.
Sure.
So those were the three things. If somebody comes in, they want to challenge a conditional use decision, and we want to counter that, we have to come up with evidence, and they refer to this as the standard for evidence, that it be independent, it be credible, and it be relevant. And they must have mentioned that a half a dozen times.
Hmm.
So, like I said, we've never really
They
been down
use
that
any
road.
examples?
I got one.
Well, he's,
Okay.
yeah, we deal in little, we're down in
Like, cause
the,
what would be an independent
minutia.
one for someone that said, hey, I don't wanna have
If you were
rock
going
on
to
the
say,
front?
put in a three-story parking garage, just an example. Not gonna happen here, but this is just an example. Attached to a movie theater, out where there's high groundwater. Okay? And you're gonna say, no, you can't put in that because you have no way of dewatering that.
Okay.
Because you're gonna turn that over to the city and our system's not allowed, our system can't handle that dewatering. Okay, so the condition would be, no, you're only allowed a two-tier, not a three, and with a one being underground. That would be a condition that could be challenged.
Right.
But we would go from the geotechnical studies.
Right, I was gonna say, that would be an easy
the
independent
geotechnical-
study.
I'm just saying, that's how, okay, that's where the decisions and stuff would be coming from. Now, it's not that it can't be done,
Right.
okay, but will the city's infrastructure handle it? So that's just an elaborate example. I actually ran into that one, so that's how I know that one.
but it's conceivably could happen in the future.
Sure.
So just bear in mind,
Yeah.
if we're gonna impose a condition, we better be on solid ground.
Right.
And
Right.
if our argument is, we don't like it,
Right.
that's not credible, that's not
Well,
independently
and I feel like
determined,
in
and it's
our
certainly not relevant.
situations, most of our conditions are related to, and maybe some of this will solve that, but are related to exterior appearance and landscaping. And that's something where like independently, I don't think there's a way to prove that. Just because we don't want you to have gravel there, we'd rather see cobblestone. That's not easy to say, well, if you had an independent person come, they'd be like, oh, it doesn't matter.
Well, if you set up a landscape ordinance, okay, it's not a condition.
Well,
If
I'm
you're
just saying,
putting
but
a
most of our conditions, as examples, most of our conditions on commercial property are related to landscape.
Sure.
That is the number one thing we put conditions on.
But a conditional use as stated in the ordinance is
Right.
very different than this.
Correct.
Yeah,
If we've got a condition, we're saying, okay, this is one of our conditions.
Right.
Okay.
The developer comes in knowing that he has to meet
Yeah,
those.
it's already in the books.
If we're sitting up there as a planning commission and we say, okay, as part of this development, the condition is you have to put in an architectural feature on the parapet of this building. Okay,
See,
make
I
a
feel like
design
we-
out of it.
I feel like we couldn't stand on that ground.
We can't,
Okay.
That's
So
what
we're
this
on
is
the same
about.
page,
That's what
yeah.
this is about.
because a lot of jurisdictions were doing that. Okay,
And most of them.
See,
have
and you
something
gotta, you have to have some compassion for the developer.
Sure.
He reads the ordinance, tries to be compliant, comes in, and suddenly we throw something at him that there's no hint of in the ordinance.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, a couple of other things. If a regulation is not plainly stated, and this is where, how being careful the way we write these ordinances. If the ordinance is vague, if the regulation is not plainly stated, the authority shall infer and apply in the regulation in favor of the land use applicant. So if we've got something vaguely stated, and the guy says, I take exception, I will take you to court on that. they would likely win
Well,
because of vagary. And that's why we try real hard
really hard.
to avoid these.
I feel like we've cleaned up a lot of
Oh,
stuff.
we used to have
the last
one
few
on
years.
it was the ordinance for
Animal
for
ordinance.
animals. And when we used to talk about beautification, we got that word out of there. What does that mean?
Cause you're
Now,
beautiful
to
is
a guy
different
that
than
runs a
my
hog
beautiful.
farm, the
Yeah.
most beautiful thing is the hog poop, you know, so.
Right.
I was just thinking
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're
And
saying.
how can you argue?
Right. Cause he
Well,
personally.
you're right.
thinks- yeah.
I think I believe you say what you're saying is true, that you think that's the most beautiful thing in the world. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind and something to remind us that we should be as clear in our language as possible. And if, when we're developing something, somebody on the planning commission, the city council says, I could read that two different ways, or that's not exactly clear. You know, if you have to explain, that's the best rule of thumb. If you have to explain what the ordinance means, you pretty much answered your own question. There's some vagary there in some cases.
I think a good example of that was the agribusiness and the recent events that we've had and how it was read as far as the different types of plants and things that are grown.
Yeah.
And this is where you gotta make sure that, anyway.
The last thing is something called a legal non-conforming use. Have you ever heard of that?
I have heard of that, yeah.
Do you know what it is?
Yeah, you can explain it
Okay.
though.
Well,
yeah.
why don't you, and then I'll just see how
Well,
it matches.
really, it doesn't have something to do with like grandfathering too, like legal, not, it can be two parts. It's like, that is no longer, like Jerry's Nursery probably is an example of a legal non-conforming use because it was, and now it's not. Or sometimes when you subdivide things and they don't do it the right way, you end up with non-conforming.
You're absolutely right. It's something that was originally legal. An ordinance was enacted that made it illegal. But the city allowed it to continue on. And if the city allows it to continue on, even after the ordinance has been changed, it is legal. That's where a code enforcement officer would be very useful in this city.
The problem that you have, and one of the things you can't do, is change an ordinance and modify a land use that's already existing. Because if you do, it's a lawsuit. Okay? So that's one thing you can't do.
That's
What
where
was their, did they just bring that up or did they have suggestions to change that? Cause it'd be, I mean, we can't do anything on that.
No, it was more, the gist of the conversation, let me just.
The only thing I've ever seen that changes
Yeah.
those is when someone comes in and, you know, say Jerry's Nursery, for instance, changes hands and they modify the building or modify something, then it triggers that they're no longer in that
Correct.
zone.
And that's correct. You are
Yeah.
correct.
Right. I think they were just talking about a situation where somebody has done it forever. The city changed the rules
It never enforced.
and never did anything about it. They allowed the person to continue. Which is sort of, you've decided, when you grandfather somebody in, basically, you've grandfathered them in forever. Now, that's that person, not the next landowner.
Right.
So,
Until the use
And it
changes.
sounds like the south end of the motocross track when that guy came in.
Right.
That he was doing it this way forever and then the city counseled him to do it this way and it screwed him over and he wanted to go back to the other way.
So that's,
and he was
that's a good example.
completely within his rights.
Yeah.
That's a perfect example.
That's
If
a-
somebody were to put in an oversized garage that required a building permit and it wasn't caught for 7 to 10 years, that's a non-conforming use. If you put an addition on your house, it's not caught. If the engineer, for whatever reason, makes a lot that's non-conforming, okay, and it's not caught, that's a non-conforming use because the lot's too small, doesn't meet the zone. Okay, those are all legal non-conforming uses, but there's a timeline, I think, attached to those that has to be in place. Has to be in place for so many years first.
Yeah, there was enough, I can't hear what
I
you're saying
understand.
on that
Yeah, no, I
presentation.
understand.
It's just something to keep in mind, though, that this
Sure.
does exist. There are legal, non-conforming uses.
And you'll see them too, like if you take a piece of ground, if I had 3 acres and I decided to subdivide a lot off and just go to the county and record it and not take it through the city, they'll stamp it and say this is a illegal subdivision, basically. And it doesn't do anything to you. I mean, maybe it hinders you when you sell it, but it just shows you didn't do this legally. And whoever buys it
You
is knowing that.
subdivided it meets and bounds.
Yep.
Instead of through the state laws of subdivision.
Exactly.
So,
That
that's
was
my
really good
report.
info.
I would suggest anytime anybody goes to training or listens to training, take notes and let's just make it a part
Yeah, I
of
like
sharing
that.
it, you know,
Yeah,
because
I
we
really
can't all
like
go to
that.
all the trainings. A lot of times they will have, the presentation recorded in PowerPoint presentations. I don't know, in the case of this Land Use Institute, it was so poorly run, I don't know what you'd be able to salvage out of even listening to the
Not only
presentation.
that, we could count this time now as training. We have to have our 4
I never
hours.
thought about that, yeah.
Mm.
So anyway, let's just, I think we should try to have somebody from the planning commission cover relevant training.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
But to have all of us go to it, I think's kind of overkill, so.
So for Greg and Jason, you have that 4 hours of training a year. And if you come to your meetings, that counts as 1 hour. So basically you have to have 3 hours.
And it
of
can all be
training.
done Online.
Yeah, we just got an hour.
We just got about an hour with Lou, so.
I will tell you this, a wonderful resource is the League of Cities and Towns.
Yeah.
And they have a booklet that's sort of the Bible. I mean, their presentations are excellent. They will answer any question you've got. And I would
And the
spend,
mayor's pretty good about sending out.
Ken, I was just gonna say, Ken sends those out.
I haven't got mine yet. I'm still waiting for my book. I told them I didn't get
no,
one.
well,
No.
they mentioned it to you? This is something you really ought to have in
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah. I can get it.
But Ken will usually send a message out and saying, hey, this is going on, and a lot of times, like,
Training.
you can watch
Isn't
it
it-
on,
isn't that
at
coming
your
up?
desk on your lunch.
When's their next, isn't there one coming up in St. George? Or is
Yeah,
it-
the
Oh, yeah,
mayor,
it's
yeah,
next
they're gonna
week.
be next week.
Well, maybe he ought to snag some books.
Yeah,
I'm
we
pretty
should.
sure he has some.
Does he?
Yeah.
Okay.
'Cause last
Anyway.
time-
Now, is the one in St. George next week, is that something that we can watch online?
You know,
I don't
for
know
some
if it is or
reason,
not.
I don't have any announcement of that.
I haven't seen it, no.
I wrote down these.
And I missed those too, that Thursday, I signed up for them and I just, so,
I'm sure it's online or will be.
Well, I ought to be given
Afterwards,
the
yeah.
Purple Heart for.
oh,
pain
you
and
should,
suffering.
you should, because
I
It's
live-
sad.
I listened to it, but I was working at the same time,
You
so
can-
I don't take notes while I'm working. I just
you showed up at the
listen.
city council meeting last Thursday with some war stories, and I'm thinking, man, I'm glad I didn't waste my time sitting there.
Well,
Wait for
if
the-
anything you wanna share training related, just let me know and the week before I can put on the agenda.
Well,
See,
see,
the cities and
Or
towns
I can
canceled
do-
their last training.
well, see, and there was a land use an hour long on Wednesday of last week,
Yeah.
last Wednesday, and it has some good
It has
information.
some good information. That was League Cities and Towns.
Yeah.
Before that was the updates of the laws with regards to moderate income housing.
Yeah.
That's the one we talked about.
And all they were doing last Wednesday was just kind of dumbing down what the legislature had on a
Yeah.
couple of bills.
And there was
A
another
couple
one
of
that's supposed to be
requirements. Yeah.
this week, but it got canceled. So.
Well,
they
it
didn't have
would be
enough
nice
participation.
whenever you're aware of it to
Share it, yeah.
not only report on it, but when you're aware of an upcoming meeting, give people a heads up so we'll know it's coming.
Yeah, you'll sign up for them and you'll get a Eventbrite ticket. And I found though that instead of looking at your focused email, there's another email, like the junk mail folder. I found half the stuff, like including those tickets that we were missing in that other folder. That we
Is that
couldn't.
where it was?
Yeah, I found them in there. So
You can go onto the website too, of the League of Cities and
Yeah,
Towns,
and
and watch
you can watch the
old
videos.
ones,
Yeah.
so you don't
And I-
have to
and
watch
I
them like when it's happening.
That's the nice
You
thing.
can go back and just watch it.
And the one that that Lou and I missed, I actually sent out a PowerPoint to everybody after that one, so. Now Liam sent us that information, because Ken was
Yeah, Liam
Ken was
did.
out of,
Yeah, we have Liam's training too, don't we?
yeah, Ken was out for the
Is Liam
count.
doing training?
I wrote, we had one last year with the attorney.
Get on that.
Yeah, Ryan did that last
Now,
year.
just so you guys know, in the city council meeting last week, Lou and I were given the assignment to work with Liam on the A1. This is spurred from the issue with the outdoor gardens and the zoning, things like that. Because we initially talked about perhaps tweaking the agribusiness to accommodate businesses like that. And people say I'm a dairy farmer, and I want to sell cows on the side for beef and things like that. We want to be able to combine, encompass all of that. But we feel that the agribusiness is the way it should be. And so we're going to work, Lou and I have been given responsibility to work with Liam and go over and maybe explore other cities and their agribusiness, another agribusiness, but their A1, and see what they've got going on. Yeah, and then we can work on that to kind of accommodate. It's kind of like the animal ordinance, that kind of spurred some changes. And what went on with this other nursery spurred changes, and that's what we're not tailoring it to that, we're tailoring it for, it's something that we saw a need based on an experience from another business. And so, anyway, we'll be working with Liam on that. And
Can I just give him a quick?
yes, please.
What I did is I looked at the A1 or A2 zone in several neighboring communities, and I found 3 that have accommodated this, and the wording they use is almost identical. Okay?
Okay.
We'd have to change our ordinance because our ordinance currently says the permitted uses and conditional uses are the same for all residential zones. So Liam could change this easy.
Right.
But I'll just read you the language.
What cities were they?
Well, I stopped looking after 3 because
Because I haven't had a chance to even go out. Last
Well,
week was a
Plain
crazy
City,
week. Okay.
West Haven, I apologize,
Look at you. You're a West Haven fan now.
and Pleasant View. Anyway, this is kind of what you and I have to talk about it, but I think this is ideal. If I don't hide it from myself. Here's the wording: nurseries and greenhouses, we're talking about, and I would put both these under conditional uses. And the nice thing about conditional uses, you kind of can make sure it's not,
Yeah.
so what I would propose is under conditional use, we'd have nurseries and greenhouses are a permitted conditional use, provided the sale of goods is limited to materials produced on the premises
Okay.
and there is no retail shop operation. That's what makes this very different from
down the road.
Jerry's.
Yeah.
So in other words, you can't bring in nursery stuff from someplace
Nursery
else.
stock and sell it.
You produce it on the land and you sell it. And I have no problem with that at
You
all.
don't have a retail store. It's just,
And the
like
same
that.
thing,
Yeah.
fruit or vegetable stands for fruit or vegetables produced only on the premises.
Okay,
I like
but
that
but the 2 nurseries in question, I mean, with like the outdoor garden and even Jerry's, he doesn't grow those trees in his backyard.
Oh, no.
He brings those in, those are stock. So how can that
He's gonna have to,
Roll.
no, I think we ought to impose this requirement. Because the critical thing is, at every one of them, there is no retail shop operation. You are not bringing stuff in and selling at retail.
Yeah, because then that prohibits them from selling.
he's a retail business over there,
I
Jerry.
understand that, I understand that.
Wait, are you talking about Jerry's or are you talking about?
I'm talking, same thing,
Jerry's, you're gonna have to be
Jerry's-
very careful with.
Jerry's, we're not
No,
even touching.
Jerry's is a commercial operation.
commercial
And it's
operation.
retail sales.
In an
The
A1
Birds
zone.
have said, we have a greenhouse, we want to sell stuff.
Sure.
Okay, you produce it on your land, you can sell it.
Right, but you can go over there and buy trees, you can go over there
Now,
and
when you
buy
say there, you're talking everything.
the outdoor garden, yeah.
Well, they're gonna have to stop
That's what I'm
that.
saying, is trees, topsoil, soil pep, all of that stuff that they bring in.
No,
That's gonna have to stop, go back
basically,
to
all
flowers.
3 places that I looked at, and I like it, it says, okay, we're not keeping you from selling what you grow on your land, which is consistent with A1. We're
Yeah,
not, whether it be fruits, vegetables, nursery stock, as long as you're producing it on your land, you
yeah,
can
and
sell
see,
it on your land.
and they're both greenhouses, obviously, they do tomato plant starters there in-house and all that other stuff, but if
If
you
he
wanna go
wants
over.
to sell plants, shrubs,
Right,
start growing them on his
but
acreage.
if I wanna go buy some insecticide,
First of all, he shouldn't even be selling.
That's not his, that's retail
But
sale.
you can't use Jerry's as an
I'm
example.
not.
No, it's retail sale.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
it's
can't
a
use,
retail sale.
yeah.
No, the minute, that's why I like it produced on the premises.
I like
I
that.
understand
That's
that.
very
It's
good.
nice
logic.
and clean.
So we have to tell them that they cannot sell soil pep or in
We'll
bags
tell
of,
them,
bags of
because
steer manure.
they are
and
then
things.
going from A1
To a
to
retail,
C2.
to
That's,
a
that's where they
commercial.
cross the line.
Right, okay,
What's
that's,
Jerry's zone?
he's A1 and he's.
But he's
grandfathered.
He
grandfathered
was there
in.
before this was,
He's
this
got the
city was.
legal, he's got the legal, illegal use.
Sharon would have the non-conforming.
Same as Heritage Ranch is a
Yeah.
He
non-conforming.
got a business license through Weaver
That's
County.
a, Jerry's a
Forced
wonderful
farmers
example
in
of
the
that.
city.
Yeah.
At the time, it was allowed in A1, and
But
then it
see,
changed. So
but
Jerry's is not an example of
No,
this.
I'm not.
They're
using-
not gonna like this, but
Right.
this is, having seen the template for this in 3 communities,
makes
and I
sense.
stopped looking
I like it.
because the wording was just virtually
makes
identical.
Well, and that keeps
And
the
it's-
true nature
it's-
of what agro,
you
or
know,
what A1
And
is.
it keeps the commercial, you always worry about how far is this gonna go commercially? Well, if they're not doing any retail sales, it's basically you grow it on your land, you can sell it.
Or-
Right.
But if you have to bring, if somebody wants some sterilized steer manure to.
Well, then you're doing a retail
Right,
sale.
exactly. But,
not
but see, with the way this is written now, farmers can grow their own animals. They can sell them on, because it's grown on the property.
Well,
And
now,
so
the one
that-
thing I
that's what I'm
didn't
saying,
see
it
is animal
encompasses-
products, but we could add animal
We could add,
products too.
yeah, we'd have to.
And I
add-
have no
I
problem.
think that's fair. If
No.
You
they're
know,
raising
eggs and other
cattle
animal,
and-
I would
and-
just put, the third one says eggs and other animal products.
The same thing with alfalfa and straw, things like that.
Exactly.
It's, I like it.
Now, the only question I have is you really have a hard time with the size of the lot. You said you.
I'm thinking a minimum of maybe 3 acres.
Well, why, if it's an A1, why can't it just be an acre?
That's, I'm leaning in your direction, actually.
Because
reason I was
they
thinking
have
is-
the zone already.
Well, that's true, and if you only have, even if you have 1 acre, you're not gonna be able to produce much there anyway, so.
Right.
With the way this
They
is
might
written,
sell eggs.
right, no.
Now, they can have as many acres as they
The
want.
way this is written, I'm okay with no minimum. But
So,
beforehand, we were talking maybe a minimum
Right,
of
if they
3.
were selling retail stuff like you were
Retail.
talking about, I could see that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, somebody can come in, if they have an acre, they can buy all these different gardening products
Or
and
this
sell them.
limits, like you
That
can't,
limit, right.
you can't grow a
This
bunch of
one-
stuff on an acre.
exactly,
It
This one,
limits
I'm in
itself.
agreement, no limits.
okay.
But the other way, I'd have heartburn simply because of the retail side. of it.
So what I would do is add to this eggs and other I put eggs because that's probably the most likely one.
Right,
Eggs and other
eggs.
animal products
Yeah. I think it's,
produced only on the premises. The very same caveat for all 3 of them.
I think it's good. I like it.
Dairy, eggs and milk.
Well, okay, eggs, milk, no, eggs, milk and other
I would
animals.
just say animal products.
Animal
Yeah, I think,
products.
I
That's
feel
what
like
I got down.
animal products
I just got
is-
animal products. That's what I've got down here.
It's fine.
Leave it there,
I was gonna
Jack.
say, that's what I was leaving at, because otherwise it's certainly some eggs, then you got milk, then you got.
Then you have goat cheese.
Cheese,
then you have-
Honey, what about honey?
Honey.
Honey's a good, okay.
Honey?
Even in that meeting. with
You beat me down and justly so.
Even in that meeting, the planning commission meeting, when the birds came in, they said that they grow everything there.
Yeah.
They didn't say that they
No,
sell
what
other
they've
items.
done is this will just say, okay, grow it on your property,
And you
you
can
have
sell
our
it.
blessing. Don't try to make this a commercial.
But if they sell insecticide or other products they bring in to sell, they can't do that
Commercial.
because
They
it's a
put a battery in it.
commercial
So
business.
moving on from that point, then how does this, because their biggest issue was signage.
Right.
How does this, and what was the feel from Liam, or what was?
We
the-
haven't
But we haven't,
talked to Liam.
we've got to
Yeah.
talk to him about signs, because
That's the other part.
that's,
Last week, I was in and out of doctors all week, so I never even got a chance to sit down with this and go over
Maybe that's where signs are allowed on an
Right.
acreage above 5
Yeah,
acres or
exactly.
something like that.
Right.
Maybe.
Because you see signs out, produce, seasonal produce is
But if I
completely
had, if I
exempt
had a
from
1
this.
acre lot, I wouldn't want my neighbor to have a sign next to me.
No,
But if I have 5 to 10 acres, I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
seeing
I
my
agree
neighbor.
with you.
I'd say-
I think signage a minimum.
Signage is based on size, I would think, and then also smaller size has to be like,
you're talking about the size of the sign or the size of the lot?
size of the property that's selling.
You could do the same too.
Because
though.
some of the,
You could say your sign is limited to this, well.
So-
that's-
so- maybe a-
Sign is limited to the size of your property.
Yeah, maybe you could have a sign in
So
proportion
many
to the
square
size of
inches per
property.
acre?
You get an inch per acre.
Or if you go feet, if you have a 7 acres, you can go a 7-foot sign. I'm just-
Yeah. But I think but that's a Liam question.
Yeah, that's a
too.
Liam
I
question.
agree.
So
So
I think those are the two most
we kind of
important
in
parts, is
agreement.
what they were
So when we
selling.
go to
and
Liam,
signing.
we'll say, okay, Liam, we've got to restructure the ordinance so that it's listed differently because they've got all the residential zones listed the same. So
Yeah.
we'll have to put something in there for, specifically for the A1.
Yeah,
We'll have these elements, nursery, greenhouse, fruit and vegetable stand, animal products, 3 things listed, same condition for each, and some kind of restriction on sign.
but I think that by law, the fruit and vegetable stands, the seasonal ones are allowed by the state law. You don't have to have a business license or anything for
We
that.
also
went over
allowed-
that last year
Yeah, we
about
did.
something.
Then you want to put that one in non-conditional?
They're also
I like
allowed-
conditional.
You might, honestly, I'd put it in
Just
there,
put
and
it
if
in there,
Liam
just-
says we have to
Yes,
take it out,
I
but I'd
like
rather
it
have it
because
worded.
It's better to keep it in there. But when I've driven past there, you know, they've got trees and stuff out there they're selling. Those, they obviously don't grow because trees, you know, take
Yeah.
forever to go. So those obviously are purchased from another source. And so they would have to stop doing that, but if, anyway,
Unless they could
We're
prove they're
being
growing them.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I've
agree.
taken off my reporting on training hat.
Okay.
I like it.
I like
I've taken
that.
off my reporting
A1.
on the A1 hat,
Just for
and
grins.
now
It's
I'm
funny, and
gonna
I
put on
printed
the
off
hat.
that too,
Just
yeah.
for grins, I'm
Lou's
gonna-
really leading the meeting today.
Just for grins, I'm gonna slip into Willard
So we
and
got
Perry.
asked to
I'm gonna slip into Willard
revise,
and
oh yeah,
Perry
we can do that.
city
Here
ordinance
you
and
go.
see what they have.
Okay.
all across the line. Now that I know what you've done.
Revise the
We made
commercial.
this stuff the
Yeah,
same thing.
and hopefully, I'm like, I know I have the latest one, so,
Lou, which one is that?
She's got, it's the,
commercial, oh yeah.
and it's
And
got,
the same.
the turf's not in there anymore, so it should be.
Here,
Is that the one right by
Okay,
each
the
now?
benefit of the two,
thank you.
members of the planning commission who weren't here before, we went through a process of reviewing, well, let me give you some history. The landscape requirements for the commercial zone in Far West has been incredibly curt and vague and everything else. And what we have had happening recently is they've come in and they put in a xeriscape, not a xeriscape. A xeriscape is you just simply throw gravel on the dirt. A xeriscape is you can use cobble or whatever, but there's plant material in there, okay? It's adapted to the desert conditions. And so we thought, okay, it's probably time that we change our ordinance so that it's less vague.
Because we were just getting a lot of.
And
pushback from
keeps
having
in
to say,
mind
yeah, you
the
can't do that.
more recent concern for water conservation and so forth. So we went round the table many times and we kind of distilled, I thought, a pretty much consensus on a whole bunch of things. And then
Looked
I
at other
went
cities.
to all the examples from the various cities and pulled out what I thought was the best language that reflected each one of the things we had decided on. And so that's what all of these represent. We ran out of time at the end of the meeting and we didn't cover parks, islands in parking lots and park strips. And so 2 things, look over this list. If you've got heartburn about anything, say it.
Is this an amendment to the current commercial
This
landscaping
will
ordinance?
this will change our ordinance.
Okay.
We have, I wished I had,
Because our
Updating.
current one is super big.
here's what ours looks like right there. I could read it to you. It says, plant material area, an area not less than 10% of the site as depicted on the site plan shall be landscaped. However, landscape area in excess of 15% requiring irrigation must be connected to a secondary water supply. That kind of got a little strange. Suitable landscape may include shrubs, trees, lawns, or similar landscape material as approved by the Planning Commission. Then it says screening, and this screening thing about where to put it, that's in
I
there.
know, I was gonna say, that's really good.
I
too.
like that.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Because I don't care about their landscaping behind the building. And
But I like that you added invisible areas to the public, so it's
Yes.
not just saying front
Yeah,
and side,
basically
it's
we're
saying,
saying
if we can see the back of your building,
if we
then it
can
needs to
see
look
if
nice.
we could see it, you've got a landscape. Okay, now other cities have done, basically said, anything that wasn't the building, the parking, storage has to be landscaped. Well, or they even put accessory use or something like that. Well, the reality is, do I care if there's a patch of graveled area or patch of land behind a building that cannot be seen by the city, do we really want them to landscape that?
I don't think it's a big
An
deal.
argument that I would make, okay, is Smith and Edwards. There's a lot of stuff you can't see from 1900 that you can see from the freeway.
That's
I feel
true.
like if we had a piece like that.
We have a lot of pieces like that from 2700.
That's true, but if it can be visible from any road to the general public, it should be landscaped, period.
Now, the
If
argument I
it's,
would make
yeah,
on the
okay.
other side of this, okay, in support of this, would be if you could see the front of the building, the sides of the building, the back of the building could be zero scaped.
Well, isn't this saying the same thing?
I don't know.
It says if it's visible
If it's
to the
visible,
public.
Yeah.
But you're saying that it doesn't have to be landscaped at all behind the building.
No,
But if
No.
it's visible.
if it's,
Only if it's visible, if the
if
back's
it's visible,
visible.
it has to be
but
landscaped.
if they put up a fence, a privacy fence, you can't see it, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be scaped. Because you can't see it from the road. Cause you got the Higley Road and you got,
Smith and Edwards is.
yeah,
fenced
and you
behind.
got Smith, right.
Maybe you ought to define what you mean by landscape, because they might, like you said, think putting rock down is landscape, and
Well,
maybe if
we'll
it's
have
not
to find
visible,
that
that's
right there
fine,
and
but
But zero skate,
This
right?
is, they don't, this makes it very
where
clear.
does it show
So
that?
would you say something like,
We got that.
can you go the other way? Can you say if back of building is visible to public is allowed to be zero scaped? Versus landscaped?
Yeah, well, let me
Or
just
something
tell you
like that,
what
that would allow
other-
them not
other-
have to have
No, no,
stuff back.
in your defense, basically, here's what a lot of them say. Landscaping shall be installed in all areas not occupied by building, parking, storage, future phase plan areas, or access ways. In other words, if it's not one of those things, you have to landscape it. Now, I opted to go the other direction and say,
It's not visible.
landscape it if it's visible.
Sure.
Okay, you could put this,
There is some vagueness to that, because like you said, along the freeway, is that visible?
Well,
It's not visible to
yeah.
the city,
Right.
but to.
It's not visible
State
to,
road, it
right.
is.
Lou, I'm sorry, I don't mean.
no.
No, it's
This
a
is-
good-
this
it's
is
a
the
good
This is what
question.
we're supposed to do. Now, what I could do, I could add this sentence in addition to what we've already got.
But those two would contradict
They
each
would,
other.
well, this
Would they?
basically says,
We're landscaping the whole thing.
it says you gotta landscape everything that's not the building, the parking, storage. Storage gets really
Agreed.
Yeah.
greasy,
Here's the thing.
and that's why I avoided this,
Yeah, no,
because,
and I understand.
well, we put a truck out there once in a while, or we lay some pipes
Sure.
out there, and suddenly they've exempted themselves from
Well-
landscaping.
As I'm driving down the freeway, or coming back from Idaho, I do it quite often. I'm trying to win the big money. I drive by Smith and
They're
Edwards.
still here.
I am still here. That's how my thing's going. I drive by Smith and Edwards, you can see the backside of
Yeah.
the building. You can see the equipment yard. back
Yeah,
of the
that
building.
guy's, I was thinking
You can
about
see the
that.
plumbing yard back in the building, and you can see the one with all the trucks.
And that,
All these would be grandfathered in, right?
and the storage
You know,
units.
unless they make changes
I'm
to
just
their
showing you
property.
Examples.
No. I want this to be now, understand, we are stopping short of talking about the species required, the size of the
Sure.
plants, the spacing of
Yeah.
plants. And the reason for that is we've gone from nothing
Right.
to this. I would rather try this out for a while before we start giving them a species list or
Yeah,
telling them the
Well, that's how we
height
decided
and
to go,
diameter
yeah.
and size of the shrubs and trees, okay? So that was purposefully left out.
So these companies though would be grandfathered in because they're already existing, right?
Yeah.
It's for new,
Yeah.
this is
This
going
new.
forward.
Yeah,
These are examples.
Yeah, that isn't gonna live up to it right now. It
But
will
if
be a
Not
mess.
as bad.
Yeah.
If they go away, if somebody else goes in
Well,
those spaces.
Or if like Smith and Edwards did a
Again.
they redid their front, would
If
they
you've got
have?
like-
part of me
live
doesn't
up to it?
care that the freeway sees the back
No.
of their.
Oh, that's true too, but I mean.
And that is
there's
the
sound walls once in a while,
only
too.
place in the whole city that would be.
I just don't want a big weed patch back there.
but if you look at Higley Road and 126, some of those places, you can see it from both the front and the back.
Yeah,
If they want to put up a fence to block it from the
Well,
public,
the whole oil.
yeah.
What's the
Oh, Hone
cone?
propane, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
That was one of my favorite ones for landscaping,
right.
or the absence thereof.
The absence thereof, right. No, I agree with you.
There's no hint of
But that's
landscaping on
definitely
that.
something you can see from both roads.
Right.
And the
And-
same with the Hoyle warehouse.
Right, and that gentleman that just came in that doesn't have access to the water now,
Yeah, he
what's
would.
his name? He wants to put in those warehouses, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
He does have both sides. Would you
Right.
count that though? Cause that is, I mean, public to
and
both
you've
sides.
also got a honey bucket right there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Both
that's another
sides.
question that I feel like could be vague. The landscape plan should include secondary water if available. Culinary water shall not be used. So if there's no secondary,
Then they zero scape.
They xeriscape.
I have to zero skip it as
There
well
are-
as water.
we should make that clear,
Well, I
like,
agree.
because that guy who came in, that's why he did it, right? It was all
Yeah,
like
it
rock.
says this-
Yeah, because he has no access to secondary.
But I thought it says that.
Yeah, it does.
I thought it said,
Talking secondary water. if
Right
it's
here,
supplied-
yeah,
yeah, I
water.
know, I thought I covered all that. They cannot, they're forbidden from using culinary water.
I would.
By law.
Right, but some
So-
people might say, well, then I can't plant anything.
Well, then they'll have to be educated because we're gonna say, no, you can plant it because xeriscape doesn't even require secondary water. In
So I
fact,
would
that's
take
exactly
out
what
if
we
available.
told the people there. They said, we don't have any secondary water and we don't want to put in culinary water. Okay, put in a xeriscape that's got desert adapted plants in it.
Right.
I understand what she's saying. I mean, the way I'm reading this is the landscaping plan shall include secondary water supply if available. So why not just get rid of if available?
Because it's not always
Yeah, it's
available.
not, cause that's what that
That's
guy
what-
read.
that was
If
put
available, okay, if it's not available, then they have the option to zero scape.
No, they never have an option to zero.
Well, it
They
doesn't
do, 'cause
say this in
culinary
here,
water shall
though.
not be used.
And it doesn't say there's no xeriscape.
Culinary water shall not
Right?
be
I'll
used.
put no
Right.
xeriscape. I can say that absolutely.
So
Because right
that's
now
what
you
I would
have-
say, there's some vagueness, because if I say, well, I don't have water,
No,
it's
I agree with that.
landscaped.
We'll state that explicitly, no xeriscape.
Sure, because right now you
You might
say.
want to put some
you have to-
definitions
I will.
You have
too,
to
And
have secondary
I-
water.
because a lot of
Plant
people don't know the
material.
difference
I
between
won't-
xeriscape and xeriscape.
You want plant material.
In other words, all landscaping will include plant material.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I'll make sure
I
that's.
think that's a good definition, because otherwise
Yeah.
landscaping could be, well, I
Well, that's the
landscaped, I
very
put
thing
rock
we're
down.
trying to avoid.
Just, you contradict yourself here a little bit, I think, in this, under the watering, is it has to be secondary water supply, and then you say culinary water can't be used. What else do they have?
Right.
If they don't have secondary, they can't use culinary, so what do?
The rain.
Well, what we're trying to say, and I will reword this, is if you have secondary water, please use it.
No, agreed.
Because we won't have plants dying and
I
we'll
would
probably
say
have
that-
better looking plants out there.
But there is no alternative.
Well, there's no alternative.
To use culinary.
Right.
Yeah.
But we still want them
Well,
to
they can't use culinary under any.
Xeriscape.
Xeriscape.
They're like the exact same word, just.
So irregardless, I wouldn't even say if it's available, I'd just say that they have to use secondary water.
Well,
But if
that
they-
one guy has no
Meaning
availability.
You have to use secondary water.
But we'd still want him to xeriscape when he.
Maybe if we just got rid of if available and let them come in and
And
plead their
say it's
case,
not available. Yeah.
that would probably.
And that-
Maybe just get rid of the-
And
Maybe
that
get
would-
rid of the whole watering
Right,
altogether.
and that
That's
was,
just,
We'll leave that in.
right, and that would be a conditional use.
Yeah, that
Just
would
say culinary water cannot be used for landscaping.
So just get rid of if
I agree.
available.
yeah.
Because that way you can say, hey, like you asked that one guy, do you have your?
Yeah, because that's why he
Geneva
came in and
asked
said,
point
well,
blank.
So if
this is
you-
why I'm doing it because I don't have
I
access to
would
water.
totally love getting rid of it though, because if I were to read this and say, it says you must use culinary water and my site literally didn't have, or sorry, you must use secondary water and my site did not have access to it, that would throw me for a loop.
Here's
So I'd be like,
the,
well, what do I do?
here's the reason why I guess I'm gonna defend what I've got here. Xeriscape is prohibited. It says very clearly, the landscaped area shall be planted with plants.
Sure.
That is not a xeriscape.
Well, you could plant plants in xeriscape.
No, you don't understand. Xeriscape.
Well, I think you need to
It's
define
spelled
it.
differently.
The X
that's-
In the
changes it.
ordinance.
The X changes the whole word.
Xeriscape in this
The
document.
difference is a Z and not an X.
The Z just means
Totally
rocks.
different.
You're growing rocks.
Well, you could also.
You're growing wrong.
Growing only
But
rocks.
that's xeriscape.
You're wrong.
That's
So we gotta close up that loophole.
And I think people may misunderstand what that is, so I think we should
Well,
just
but I
be
don't-
clear on our definitions.
Okay, where is it that you have troubles? When it says the landscape shall be planted with plants that are well suited
Where's
to
this at?
conditions at the project site
Plant
and must
materials.
include native and locally adapted shrub, trees, or other ornamental grasses and perennials compatible with a xeriscape environment.
Right, but Right.
Now, so what's vague about that?
That's not, but we're not saying you can't do xeriscape.
Well, it says it shall be planted with plants, so you
It just says
cannot,
plants shall be well suited.
A
It doesn't say
xeriscape-
landscaping includes
a
plants.
xeriscape has no plants in it.
Yeah.
Right,
That's where the definition needs to say.
right. I think you just
But
need to
I
have a
mean,
landscaping
I will
means
just put
this.
zeros, at the end of that, I will have a
Xeriscape.
xeriscape will not be permitted, xeriscape friends defined will not be permitted.
And why can't you have turf?
I didn't say you can't have turf.
It says
It does
landscaping
say-
shall not include turf.
Yeah.
Oh, you give them the old one. Dang it. I
Oh,
thought
did you
you-
take that out? Sorry. That's
Yes,
the one thing
I
you took out.
modified,
I'm
no,
sorry.
I told you. Okay, here's.
So
the
maybe we're looking at,
improved
maybe,
Well, it's only the one thing. It's just this
No,
one
there was
line.
two things I
Okay.
changed in it. You had two concerns.
That's the thing I
changed
like the
both.
most about it.
Oh. it shall not include.
That was deleted.
so sorry,
Okay,
Lou,
good.
maybe I'm probably not communicating well. When we say landscaped area, I think we need to define what landscaped means. Either xeriscape or
well,
full,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Side
it,
plant materials
landscape
and
means
Okay.
Give the definition.
plant materials.
Landscape area shall be planted with plants. How is that not clear?
Where's that at, though?
It's plant materials. The plantscape area shall be planted with
Okay,
plants.
so mine doesn't have that.
We don't see that.
What?
So that's
Oh, is that
probably
what
why
it is?
we're
Oh,
unclear.
sorry, Lou.
See, we had two
Okay.
things. Okay.
That,
Okay,
okay,
because you're right. Those were my two comments.
They were, and
to
I
it.
corrected them
Sorry.
both.
So that
I thought I
clarifies.
had the
I couldn't
updated.
understand, why aren't you,
Sorry.
how can you?
Geneva,
I know, I'm like, I think we're on
That's
two
the
different
first time he's
pages
got a
here.
little aggressive. I was like,
No, no.
Hey,
no,
Geneva,
but
you had one job.
So that wording makes sense.
anyway, so.
Okay,
Okay,
which,
thank you. That makes, that
No,
clarifies.
In my
No, no.
first revision.
We had that and we said, no turf will be allowed, and we thought, no, if a guy wants to put in a secondary water subterranean system for turf, which is absurd,
Sure.
he can do it. So we
That
thought,
clarifies
we're not gonna
exactly.
prohibit it.
Sorry, Lou.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I couldn't, how on earth?
Well, it was
did you
just
not
a-
understand it?
Like-
That's why I was like, I don't see the word landscape
Is yours-
area.
You got the old
I
one?
got the old one.
I got the old
So
one too.
here, how many did
So,
you print
I
off?
made 7, but I can't,
The other thing I would ask about the rock, can they use, do they have to use rock or
Keep this one.
yeah, here.
on ground cover? Do they have to
No.
use rock or can they use mulch
Really screwed that one up.
on the ground
No,
cover
no,
area?
Here's the reason why I didn't put mulch down.
Okay.
Anybody that's done any landscaping realizes you put in bark chips or mulch and it's only a matter of time before it grows the most
Yeah.
wonderful weed crop you can
Not
imagine.
even that, it blows around.
There's nothing good about
I'll give you
it.
my
The rock is
address.
intentional. You
That
don't want
was
to allow other
intentional.
things. Okay.
And that's done in several of them.
You could require a barrier underneath it.
It won't.
But
Help
it
with
doesn't,
mulch.
it doesn't.
You got the
prevent
soil
it.
above the barrier.
yeah,
The mulch
Uh,
literally,
Three,
like-
and
no,
I could tell you this.
the
from
mulch
personal
like grows those
It-
things.
It's a perfect growing
Yeah.
medium for plants.
Go by my house.
From my world, in the stormwater, you want it to grow things.
Oh, yeah, go by
Well,
my
yeah,
house and my neighbor
right,
to the
but the last
east
thing
has a
we want-
bark mulched field that I'd like to. no, God,
and you know, the thing that
never
I
mind.
don't, on that
But
ground,
go by it, it grows a lot of stuff.
It's,
And it is all weed barrier.
so that was by design.
Shut up.
And we also put decorative rather than just go and get road
see,
gravel.
I've got a neighbor that's got those recycled rubber tires. I can pick up pieces and it says Goodyear on the side. I tell you, my dog loves those. And every time we go by, I have to pull her back. I mean, those things get everywhere
Yeah,
and they
all
don't
around.
decompose. Yeah, the rubber, it's hideous.
And it's expensive just to
I'm gonna give
Yeah.
you
cut it
props.
up and sell to somebody.
I'm gonna give you props under ground cover. The state rules and regulations for stormwater is that you want it to infiltrate into the ground. So under landscaping, area shall be covered with a minimum of 3-inch layer.
No, wait, where?
To allow water infiltration
Which
into
one
the
is it
ground.
on?
Ground cover.
Ground cover.
Minimum
Saying you
3 inch
use the
layer.
word infiltrate
Yeah.
around,
Yes,
so
you
good
can.
I
job.
borrowed that.
Correctly.
That's great.
I borrowed it.
That's- Robbie will love that.
No, but you say you don't like that?
No, I'm gonna give
Somebody
you
likes it.
props for that.
Don't give me credit. I borrowed that from somebody.
Hey,
I
it's in
thought
the-
that sounds kind of
it's in the
good.
document.
Yeah.
It's good.
No, excuse me for getting so excited.
It's
I
okay.
just couldn't understand why people couldn't read my clear English.
I was like,
We're
we
even.
need to
You were
define.
late. I handed out the wrong one. We're
Okay.
even now.
that clarified it.
Fair enough on that one.
I mean, there's no turf requirement in here. That was removed.
No, in fact, we would not really even encourage turf, but we're not gonna prohibit it.
And I don't think
And
commercial.
that was my comment, that was my two comments.
And that was
were-
your concern.
Because I would still like, I like grass. If I was doing something, I may want to incorporate some sort of.
But don't we have some, like, it can't take up more than a certain percentage?
We don't
It
have.
was
Not in
it wasn't
here.
the previous one, it was 15%.
Right, it was in the previous.
Right.
I think maybe we ought to have a max amount
But I
of
think
turf.
realistically,
Well, it already has
businesses,
to be
I think
watered
the minute,
properly.
I'll tell you why you don't need that. The minute you tell them they have to have a drip or bubble system,
Yeah, it
Yeah,
will.
so-
you have automatically eliminated any large turf area. Because you just do not water turf
That way.
with drip system.
and on top of that, if you're a commercial business, you don't want to have to deal with mowing the
Well,
lawn.
yeah, why would
That's
they
not
want
true,
that?
though, because if I'm a landscape company and I want a cool display out
Oh,
front that
that's
has
true.
lawn,
Oh, you're right.
so
That's
that,
true.
and that's why I took
But
it out
so go with
originally, because I'm like,
go with perennial ornamental grasses and
right,
shrubs.
but you
I
never
mean,
know. I mean, there are some
Well,
things.
No, that makes sense. That
Or if
makes a lot
you're
of
a-
sense.
you
I
cater
saw
to
no
golf
problem, as
courses.
long as they are, our main concern though is make sure that we're conserving water.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I took out turf, because turf usually isn't a water conserving plant option.
Right.
So, but
From erosion
at her
control,
suggestion, I eliminated that and I also clarified this other thing, so.
Is it worth specifying in here like no overhead spray or anything like that?
It's,
I mean, it
So we
says
just have-
underground drip or bubbler system.
He just
That's
has to define.
That's enough?
Yeah.
We don't need to spec, okay.
well, I could
Sure.
put, do you want me to just put parens? And then
Parens.
parens.
Oh, like, is that a new way to mow? Is that a new way to water your lawn?
You were having
no.
trouble with
I
DBH the
don't
last
touch
time
any
too.
of this stuff, okay? Jeez.
It might be worth clarifying, like
Yeah.
no spraying, no sprayers.
I like that.
Like say if we're trying to eliminate vague, then.
Well, we want to make that very clear.
I
Okay,
like that.
Because they might think like, well, that's optional.
Right.
okay. In terms of what we had yet to discuss, I don't think we ought to suggest that they landscape the park strip.
No.
I don't think we ought to even talk about that.
No,
Because we're flipping the strips, we're going the opposite direction on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, they're actually telling them now to tear them out.
Yeah, so the current one was no turf in areas 8 feet or less, right?
Oh, that's, okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, and so I would encourage us to,
Just don't
Do
even
that.
go there,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, that's what I thought. And the same thing with little islands in parking things. I would just as soon not even bring that
I
up.
wouldn't bring in turf, okay? But that, we do need to take care of the heat bubble that radiates off of your parking lot. But again, it's gonna depend on the size.
But they can still have the little knobs and.
Again,
things,
agreed.
They-
just-
And they can do it, they can put
Concrete or
gravel there and not
gravel.
call it landscape because they don't have to put a plan in.
Yeah,
put a tree in
and
there.
some of those little things have bushes and.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm looking at, is I'm trying to get a vertical tree for shade to take care of the heat radiating off those asphalt jungles. I mean, you look over there at, Amazon, and the heat that's gonna come off that
Oh, yeah,
parking lot
it's
this
gonna-
summer is
you
gonna
can
be
fry an egg on it.
Yeah,
astronomical.
it's gonna be awful.
You know, there's no,
But what kind of language do you put in this? Or should we just worry about it when it happens?
Or
I
just-
think one of the things we need to do is we need to talk about what size of parking lot are we looking at? Okay, the parking lots that I've seen so far, I don't know that I'd be too much concerned with putting islands in it. Right.
The only one you're gonna run into is something like the M1 over here.
Right.
Or we don't have any big enough commercials that are gonna have parking
Or
lots
the-
that
Right.
have that
We're not gonna have big
massive
parking lots,
asphalt.
yeah.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you get the M1s, the two, you know, where they're gonna split into the two M1s, those potentially are gonna have large parking lots.
well, wasn't it eliminated anyways from a turf perspective, because if they're only allowed to irrigate it through bubblers, they're not gonna put them in the islands.
They will.
That's, if you do it initially, that's not that big a
Why don't we
deal.
just say no turf in the islands?
Well, but he's not talking about
Oh,
turf,
you're
he's
talking
talking
about
about a
trees.
tree.
We're talking about
Shrubs and
landscape.
stuff, yeah, so.
What I'm trying to do is break up the,
Yeah.
I'm trying to break up the heat coming off that parking lot.
We've also got that behind Maverick too, that one, that M1
I just
on
don't
the
know
north
that I'm
end,
that worried about the heat.
You know, but again, I'm looking at
long term.
Yeah.
long-term, you know,
Yeah.
Long term, it's
I'm
not
just-
our parking
he's
lot.
being
doesn't become a-
environmentally
doesn't
friendly.
become a city road.
Well,
can we specify a certain percentage?
you know, if you look at the language on some of these though, when they talk about these parking islands,
right.
then they start having to
Has
worry
to be
about how
shrubs
tall the
or
tree is and the clearance, so it doesn't hit Then you got a whole nother set of requirements you have to put to make sure it doesn't interfere with line of sight, with
Well, that's where I said-
clearance and
I think
everything
if we
else.
just
So that's
put it-
why I let it off.
Put a decorative tree in there, you know, it doesn't have to be a big oak tree.
But,
We
but,
still have to approve the landscape
yeah,
plan.
but with what limited, with
But
what,
if you're not telling them they have to do it, sorry.
no, you're fine, go ahead.
You're not telling them they have to do it, then they're not gonna do it.
I just don't, I mean, if, I could see it if we were getting turned over with the product, but we're not. Their surface area, their heat, all that is all on them. They have to replace
But
the
it's gonna
parking lot.
It's gonna radiate and reflect.
Yeah, but not, I mean, we're not talking about anything that doesn't already happen.
Let's leave that open for now, because I wanna do some more research and bring it back.
Well, but this is probably gonna go forward pretty soon because we're
I
gonna
get
see
that.
the attorney.
Okay, here,
I'll have it by the
here's-
next meeting,
But yeah, next week.
Okay,
if not before.
We also have to be able to have it measurable. So if we do something like that, we have to know, okay, well, 6 shrubs equals this ratio.
Sure.
And so that would, I mean, it puts another,
so you would talk about specific tree and or shrub requirements in these islands, but never mention it on any of the rest of the
yeah, I
landscape.
don't like that.
That one bothers me a
Okay,
great deal.
okay, with what few locations we do have for these facilities,
Right.
can't we just somehow word it or even ignore it until they come and deal with it on a case by case?
You do the catch-all, the landscape plans have to be approved
Don't
by,
even suggest it in
Well,
there.
all your
and-
M1
commission
All your
and-
M1 uses have
Yeah.
conditional use anyways.
Yeah.
So
So we
you
could
could
just,
plug that into
Put it
an
in our
M1.
landscape item,
but we,
the landscaping ordinance, and with the new rules that they're passing down, if you don't have it written down somewhere and they challenge it,
Yeah, but
I don't think it's fair to have someone come in and be like, here's my plan, and you're like, well, I
Oh,
actually
but
want some trees there, and it's not in our
Okay,
ordinance.
you got a point there.
Yeah.
Here's,
Yeah, you
here's
got a
my
point there.
problem with your
Sure.
proposal. This whole thing is aimed at benefiting the people that are looking at the business, not benefiting the customers that get out of their car and walk into the business.
Or the
No,
employees.
seriously.
it's good, both, it's both.
Well, how,
Because you can put a
if that
nice,
parking
you
lot
can
is
put
hot,
nice-
why do I care if I'm driving down the road?
you can put nice trees out there, ornamental trees, on the outside edge of that building that'll shade the building for the parking lot and the customers and cool the building.
But now you're talking outside of the building, not just the.
What if you don't have
That may
secondary
be where your
water?
park strip, that may be where your
Can't
bubble,
keep a
that's where
tree
maybe your
alive.
bump
No,
outs are.
But again, you said cool the building. This thing's aimed at what the premises looks like from the
Trying to
public.
eliminate the heat bubble.
Well, wouldn't it be
You're doing it
10%?
For different motivations.
It'd still have to be
Landscape.
10%, wouldn't that?
Yeah.
That would incorporate like their
It's not
parking,
really
they'd have to
landscape.
still be 10%.
No, but the objective is different. The objective is different.
You do it with landscape.
Okay,
No,
but couldn't this be
realize
part of
that,
the
but-
engineering plans?
Yeah, but the engineer doesn't usually dictate
Oh,
heat
okay.
bubbles.
You're right.
That's the hard part. Like, I
You
just don't know that we have the resources to say, oh yeah, the heat produced from this is gonna be this. That would require this ratio of plants
It
and
would
at
require
this
a lot
height
more
and
on
this
this.
species.
Well, say you have a huge building, right? And you have a big parking lot, you still need 10%. So they're only gonna be able to do some around their building, and they're probably gonna have to
How about this?
extend it
You do
into the parking lot,
research.
part of that
There
10%.
you go. And then we'll revisit it.
What was that?
Let him do research for next meeting and then we'll revisit it. Yeah.
Okay, then basically with the clarification of the new addition,
Sorry.
we are going,
It makes
and
much
we
sense.
all, I think we
And add
decide
the
we'll leave if
definition.
available still in there with the.
Yeah, I like
So-
the if available.
Unless I'm mistaken, we're gonna come to the next session with this very same
Yep.
document.
I have a hard time.
Except for putting in no overhead sprinklers.
Yeah, but that's why it says
That
if
I will-
available.
And no zero scaping.
Yeah.
Well,
Is that what you want to add in here?
Because
do
if
you
you read
really
it
need it
without
without-
if
You should put
available,
no
it makes
zero
it sound
scaping.
like you can't
I think
do
we should
anything if
put
you
no
have
zero
Okay, I'll
scaping,
put that in.
specify it.
I'll have to- zero escape.
Yeah.
Put it all down, then open up the question.
Move over here.
I just like, I like the
Yeah, because it's
if
open to
available
interpretation
because it's
right
fine
there.
for
That
that.
makes sense.
I could do that. It's a couple more sentences.
Use it if it's
I'll work on
available.
that because
when you-
ordinances
when
have
you
a
read it
definition
secondary-
section, and they just.
I know.
put some definitions.
the reality is people have
But
come
you
in
can't, you can't
and
require it.
I am an ecologist, but I've approved
Well, you can
zero
require they
scape,
use
not
it if
realizing
it's
what I was
available.
doing. I assumed there would be plants
But it
until
still
I
needs
started
to be
looking at
safe.
Far
If
West
it's
and saying,
available,
well, a
it's
lot of
required
these
to
don't
use
have
it.
any plants.
What if you just said,
I'll work on
if
that.
you use irrigation, it has to be secondary water?
But then it allows them to have it to the property and not use it, and you can't do that. It has, if it's to the property, they have to use it.
Yeah.
If available, that's what if
Yeah,
available means.
that's what Greg and I are going, that's why I say, like, if it's there, it has to be used.
Well, that's the thing is, if it's there, they should use it anyway, and by taking it.
But it's not, they should, they have to.
Well, no, if you put on here, landscaping shall include secondary water supply,
Yes.
period.
If available.
If available.
Because it's not always available.
If it's available, it's available. What's the
If it's
problem?
not available,
Then if
and
you,
it's secondary, then they're gonna have to look at another way to do the landscaping.
No, they'll do the same thing. They just will just not use water. They'll just have
right,
a
they'll just do
xeriscape
the,
that's more desert adapted
if it's
plants.
available, we're trying, cause
Is
If
is
you
it worth
read it-
adding clarification? If secondary water is not available,
you could
you
do
must do a xeris.
No, because the xeriscapes involve secondary water too. They're both,
Well,
they're
so
both.
how are they gonna do
Xeriscape
landscaping
is
with
if-
zero
if you go
water?
into a building and basically you see rocks and miscellaneous shrubs and trees.
This is where
and
we go back to
That is a
definitions.
xeriscape.
Right.
That's what it is.
How are they gonna keep those plants alive if they don't have
Because,
secondary?
because if you plant,
And
if you
they
plant the
and
desert-friendly
they
plants
can't
that
explode.
live on the
Came into this
rainwater.
valley,
Drought
came
tolerant,
into
drought
this
tolerant
valley,
Yes.
There were
That's
plants,
all
Water by
fine.
hand.
and they
So
weren't
I'm
all along
saying-
river
I'm saying-
courses.
Verify that if there's no irrigation, they must use xeris.
No, they're gonna use xeriscape always,
No matter what.
no matter what.
They just have to change
That's-
plant
that's the
material.
requirement.
That's what he's
Yeah,
saying.
I was
zero
The only
scale.
change, hold on, can I clarify? The only change is that the plant material would change.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
because
So
you've
it's
gotta
just
get
the
more
same
drought,
thing,
desert
just
adapted
plant
plants.
material would change.
So, but
Which
listen,
is true. They don't have to water by hand because all those little swells that go in the LID places, they're never touched with water. They just go in there. I know, and they die, but it's okay.
You know what? I'm gonna revise this and route it past you.
There you
I'm
go.
happy to do that.
Good.
So
And you
I'm
print it
just-
off next time.
I'm happy to do that.
I'm
I'm just thinking of the scenario, so you have a secondary water supply, to the property, right? And so they plant drought tolerant plants that don't even necessarily need that secondary water supply. Are we mandating that they still use that water?
They don't
when they
have to
don't need-
use it. They do have to hook up to it though.
That's fine.
And
Yep.
that is simply just a utility requirement.
Yes.
Same as you can't just decide, I'm not gonna use power,
Okay.
or I'm not gonna use gas. That's
Okay.
why, they don't have to use it, they
Sure.
have to pay for it annually.
Yes, yep,
They don't have to use it.
yeah. So I just think we
Yeah.
should maybe
So I think.
evaluate that, look at
clarification on
that. Yeah, clarification on that.
So
Because then it
your
sounds
point
like they
is,
have to use the
They
irrigation.
don't
They
have
gotta-
to use it
That's
even if
true.
they have it. Is
Even
that-
if they have it, yeah, as long as they're planting plants, drought tolerant plants that don't require water, I mean, sure.
They don't
Well, and
have
all they'd have to
do
do
it.
is just plan accordingly. you
Yes.
know?
But then
This
if-
makes it sound like
Then
they
if
have
it
to
dies,
use
should
the
they
water.
have to replace it? Right?
Well-
So they,
Have to replace
what
it.
if
Yeah,
they
they
all
have to-
die and they're
Well,
just
they
like,
have to
oh.
replace the dead
Yeah.
plants, no matter what.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
So
I
it
don't care
says
if there's.
deceased or dead
secondary
material
water
shall be
or not.
removed and replaced in a timely manner.
Okay,
Okay,
now, that's
So I'm
not
not-
gonna move. We're not
I'm
gonna
like, well,
move
we
that.
did it once. They just didn't make it.
Well.
Hey, we have a
I'm not
lot of
gonna-
that around
I'm not gonna
here.
get into the enforcement issue.
You're
because we
retired.
run
It
into
sounds
that
like
with
you should
every
be the
single
code
ordinance we've got.
enforcer,
Yeah,
right?
enforcement business.
But
Yeah.
what this, they are served notice,
Agreed.
so we can go and say,
Agreed.
replace the dead plants.
And that it's spelled out here, like, hey, we told you when you did this, that it should be removed and replaced in a timely manner. There's no question, like, hey, we didn't know that. It's in here.
So
Which we
we've
didn't
tried to
have
do two
before.
things. We've tried to be compliant with water conservation, and we've tried to make it more robust in terms of explaining what our requirements are. And hopefully clearly. So I'll make these changes, run it past you, and we'll come with your suggested additions. I think we're getting close to something
I think we're about there.
improved enormously over what we had.
And a lot more direction.
So I'm thinking on the parking lot stuff, if you have 2 rows of 15 stalls, put 2 trees in there.
But you'd almost have to do it on a square footage of asphalt base.
Right.
You'd have
Yeah,
to say,
you'd
if you
have to do
have
that.
X
It's
amount
gotta
be
of
something.
asphalt, you have
Yeah.
to have 2 trees, but then 2 trees and say, I don't have islands in my park strip, or I don't even have, parking islands, then where do I put the trees?
Or I don't have water.
Well,
Yeah,
and
or- yeah,
yeah, they gotta,
I
you
feel like
gotta
that's
tell them where to put the
nitty.
trees. I mean, if they,
Don't tell them where to put the trees.
I don't doubt that. We
Tell
may
us what
have
you
to
really think,
temper the
Greg.
language a little bit too.
Exactly where Lou was gonna tell her to put some trees.
I was
Like,
about,
where my
I was
mistake?
very close to telling her where she could put her zero
I'm
scape.
sorry.
I think Darren brought up another good point. Do we have a spot where it says that we have to review it before? Cause like if they think that they're Does
Oh.
the,
That's
Site
probably
plan.
in our, yeah, site
Site
plan
plan.
ordinance.
cause if they just think that they've hit all these things and then.
The site plan
We will
should
have a-
include, among other things, and the good ones do, that shows a landscape plan, the kind of plants they're putting, the spacing, all of that stuff.
So should we say, please include this information in here?
Cause that'll
It's
be
in
the
the
site plan that they have to
requirement.
submit anyway, so.
One of the checkoff lists.
One of the
Alright,
things that came out of the rule changes.
Yeah.
And I want to clarify this more with Nate, but you only get one review.
What do you mean?
Yeah. that's-
Oh, yeah,
that-
that, so what would
Oh, yeah,
happen
good
is
point.
we would come to you'd come to planning commission instead of having a preliminary meeting and then a final, you would have one meeting, which would combine both essentially, and then it would be staff approval after that.
So, but you
Which
can
will
have them come back with one corrections.
Okay, which will throw a wrench in our
Yeah.
situation because most cities are set up to have staff approvals with full-time planners. We aren't set up that way.
See, that's what they discussed in that Wednesday meeting last week, was that. That's
Yeah.
what I kind of struggled with.
And honestly, most bigger cities have already gone to that.
Have they?
And most of them don't actually, anything related to site plan, subdivision that isn't affected by, I can't remember what the thing, engineering maybe, doesn't even go to city council anymore. It's a planning commission recommendation and a final and that's it. And then staff approval and done. You don't ever see the city council.
But engineering stuff, hydrology, flood control, roadway widths, that kind of stuff, all has to be reviewed. There, they don't have the requirement of one review. Okay, they get 4.
Which, you know what makes it better too? You have one meeting. That means before you get on that agenda, you pretty much have a clean engineer's memo. You're not coming to see us with 12 items on your engineer's memo. So helps a little bit both ways.
It does. But like, I said, that's just something I wanted to point out.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Nate and I were talking about that last week.
Yeah, I wonder about that.
Yeah, I forgot.
No, I'm just thinking
Oh.
about, why not them resolve everything with the engineer before we
Well,
even
that's
see
the
it?
goal. When they come to preliminary, there
That
should
we,
be
that
1 to
certainly is
2
not, that's
items. And
certainly,
that's it. And it's not been the
sometimes we got
case.
2 pages of.
Yeah.
You're not looking at zoning. The engineer's looking at engineering requirements.
Oh,
Right.
He's
they,
not looking at the zoning.
well,
Right.
it does, because they will talk about a lot of our zone
They
requirements.
should.
Yeah.
Are they
'Cause they're-
sloppy now? Are they not doing that? They
No,
used
they
to.
are.
Okay,
Yeah,
but they
they
look at the zoning. They
Yeah.
look at
I'm
our,
just saying, not all of them do.
well, they're pretty decent in ours.
But I think in past, we've had a lot come through that has had 12 or 14 items on a memo and we're like, what?
And
But
immediately
the
you
start
get
of the
into.
development meetings too on Fridays, those have helped clean up some
Oh,
of
yes.
those.
that
Speaking
will.
of
A
which,
lot,
do you want to report on that this time because we're not having another meeting for the next,
We didn't do anything, did we?
last Friday
Oh,
with Cody
yes.
from,
Okay, last Friday we met with a potential buyer of the piece. So where Peterson's is, so the 4-way intersection right over here that's closed down on the other side where
old
they.
gas station, Cody
Yeah, the
Stevens.
old gas station where
Yeah.
they sell like wooden products and potatoes or something.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and,
Statues, fireworks.
yard-
Fireworks,
Statues.
yeah.
Right there.
It is
Yeah.
statues.
Yeah,
So he's potentially looking at it to do a little flex space building and maybe a little convenience store.
yeah, his name was Cody Stevens from Interlock. He's the one that, if I get drunk driving, convicted and have to have a device to start my car, I have to blow in it with a breathalyzer. He installs those and maintains them. He's right now down in West Haven near Nut and Bolt Supply, and he wants to build right there.
Now, is that
And-
in Durant selling his
Yeah.
property?
Yeah, it's listed.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And so,
Get rid of
So
that.
he's just looking to relocate. So he came in with a very basic site plan and he's gonna go through engineering and look through.
pretty
some
good.
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, it was super basic. So he's got some stuff to figure out. So maybe in the next few months, we might see it.
And we also,
Isn't that,
They have to
yeah,
pull
don't
the
they have
gas
to pull
out.
the? don't they have
no,
to
that
pull
was,
the tanks
it was
out?
already done by the state. The state already did that.
So those tanks have been removed, yeah.
Yeah, and he's got,
They require the tanks.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
all that's been removed. I think it's just been a struggle with where that property is located to.
and ironic,
It's been listed for a while.
yeah, and ironically, we were discussing about where we see that sign magically pop up with the car wash. It actually says on the Weaver County's plat, Ultimate Car Wash.
Yeah, they own it.
They own it now, yeah. We thought it was just kind of under,
No,
you
they've
know.
owned it. They came in months and months
oh, did they?
ago
Oh, okay.
to talk about it before they bought it,
Oh,
but
okay.
then and sometimes they'll just sit on it. But yeah, that one, I forgot about that development meeting. So he has some stuff. He just wanted to kind of come in and make sure he could do something like that.
Yeah,
So we'll see that in the future. That was it. Okay.
Greg,
Sorry, I'm so sorry.
I'm really worried about my lawn
Me
dying.
and Lou are gonna have to.
When
like,
are they
shake
gonna
up.
turn on the water?
She's
Give
gonna
me the
hate
demo.
me the rest of her life.
I was just like, I just don't
I even
feel
went
clear.
through it and I'm like, okay, that was the one.
Worried
I
about
made
mold
my
this year,
comments
if
to
anything.
Lou.
I thought I
This is the one.
gotta
Bring
just
it
throw that
up.
out.
Really, we're on the same page, because you clarified it, I just
No, no,
didn't see it.
Well, and she brought it up at first, okay, I can see your problem. We
Yeah.
got rid of
Because
that.
the two
fast.
things you guys brought up were when he sent it to me for a review were the two things I mentioned.
Yeah.
So, and,
Yeah, we got
What is
those.
that in the street?
yeah, please. Okay, guys. Great work. No city council meeting next week.
No,
So then we'll just
no,
have,
Ken sent a text message out.
we'll just have a,
We got it.
Well, it is
oh,
the,
other computer. Nope, no, the one with the
And
keyboard and the
I
mouse,
will
no.
rework this.
Are you done?
And we have. If you're in agreement with what
I
I've done,
agree.
it's
Just
it's
for grants, I'm gonna look at Perry and Willard.
Okay, it just, when I just saw it 3 times,